Coming up today as Paris remembers the victims of Friday's terror attacks. France launches airstrikes on Islamic State stronghold in Syria. French police also reveal one of the attackers is still at large. Meeting with other world leaders at the G20 summit in Turkey, President Park Geun-hye calls terrorism a cancer that stands in the way of world peace and security. Plus, UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon will reportedly travel to Pyongyang this week. It's hoped his trip will improve inter-Korean ties and boost efforts to resolve the North Korean nuclear issue. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 16th of November. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. And we start with France's reaction to the terror attacks in Paris. French jets have been pounding Raqqa, which is the Islamic State group's stronghold in northern Syria. For the latest on this and the hunt for the remaining attacker, we connect to our Connie Kim, who's standing by for us at the news centre. So, Connie, these airstrikes seem to be France's retribution for Friday's shocking terror attacks. What do we know so far?
Well, Mark, in the first direct retaliation for the attacks in Paris, French warplanes have bombed targets in Raqqa, which is IS's de facto capital in Syria. Now, the Islamic State group took responsibility for the attacks that killed 129 people and injured hundreds more, many critically, and French President François Hollande had promised a merciless response. And here's what the French are saying. The country's defense ministry has confirmed that jets dropped 20 bombs on a command and control center, a jihadi recruitment center, training camp, and arms depot run by the extremist group. The aerial raids were launched from bases in the United Arab Emirates and Jordan on Sunday night local time. No word yet on how successful the raids were, nor if any civilians were killed. Now, this comes as France remains in shock following last Friday's senseless terror attacks on a number of soft targets in Paris. We now know that 7 attackers detonated their suicide belts, killing themselves and anyone unfortunate enough to be stood nearby. 2 of the attackers have been identified, one being 29-year-old French national Ismail Mustafa. He was apparently known to France's security services, but had never been charged with any terrorism offenses. And the other has been identified as Bilal Hafdi, who was either 19 or 20. It's believed he fought in Syria before coming back to France. A massive international manhunt is underway for Belgium-born French national Abdeslam Salah, who is believed to have been involved. Officials now have described the 26-year-old as dangerous, and according to CNN, Saleh was questioned by French police shortly after the attacks, but was not detained. Also on Sunday, several AK-47s were found in an abandoned car, which is believed to have been used by the attackers. A Syrian passport was also found next to the body of one of the 3 suicide bombers who attacked near the French National Stadium.
And Connie, Parisians have been paying their respects to the people that lost their lives in the attacks, and it was a very somber atmosphere.
Right, Mark. Thousands lined up at Paris's iconic Notre Dame Cathedral to pray at a memorial service on Sunday as France entered its second day of national mourning.
I think of the families today who are in mourning and distress, and I came to pray at Notre Dame for the peace of these poor people who are now dead and their families who are in pain and sadness.
I wish I could say we have to find a solution. I don't even know what that could be, but we have to come together and at least support each other.
The Catholic Cathedral had been closed since Friday's attacks, but opened for a special service to pay tribute to those who lost their lives. In cities around the world, people are praying for Paris. They have been gathering in front of French embassies, public squares, and landmarks to mourn the victims. Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Im Sung-nam will visit the French embassy in Seoul on Monday to express Korea's condolences. The embassy has also been seeing regular folk come by as well to pay their respects. That's all I have for now. I'll bring more updates in our later newscasts. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Connie, for that report. Now, with the conflict in Syria growing, US President Barack Obama and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin met informally on the sidelines of the G20 summit currently underway in Turkey. The move is seen as an effort to confront Islamic State militants, but some major disagreements remain. Son Jung-in has this report.
Speaking at the G20 summit in Turkey on Sunday, U.S. President Barack Obama pledged to increase efforts to eliminate the Islamic State militant group and bring about a peaceful transition in Syria.
And as we, I'm sure, each said to President Hollande and the French people, we stand in solidarity with them in hunting down the perpetrators of this crime and bringing them to justice.
Putting aside their long-standing differences on the Syrian conflict, Obama and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin were seen engaged in an intense conversation on the summit sidelines. Although the content of their talks was not disclosed, a White House official later said the two leaders agreed on the need for UN-sponsored peace talks between the Syrian regime and the country's opposition, as well as a ceasefire to resolve years of war. But Russian officials described the meeting less optimistically, saying that while they shared similar strategic goals in the fight against IS militants, the two countries remain in disagreement on tactics. The U.S. and Russia have been at odds over ways to resolve the growing conflict in Syria. While Washington has criticized Putin's deployment of Russian forces there, Putin has defended the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in the face of U.S.'s calls for his departure. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
So in Turkey, it was the first day of the G20 summit on Sunday, and anti-terror efforts, as we just heard, have been front and center of the discussions. President Park Geun-hye condemned the bloodshed in the French capital and called for global efforts to counter the scourge of international terrorism. Our Hwang Sang-hee, who is traveling with the president, filed this report.
World leaders observed a minute's silence to remember the victims of recent terror attacks at the start of a two-day G20 summit in Turkey's resort city of Antalya. This year's summit has been overshadowed by the deadly attacks on Paris. At a working dinner on Sunday, President Park denounced the bloodshed.
The president stressed that terrorism continues to evolve. Its new forms threaten the lives and basic values of people around the world. She said terrorism has become a cancer within the international community that hinders world peace and security.
At the working dinner, world leaders focused entirely on terrorism and the refugee crisis, calling them the most urgent global challenges. President Park said the UN Security Council resolution on blocking the flow of foreign fighters to Iraq and Syria must be put into force. She added South Korea will contribute by bolstering legal measures to sever the flow of cash to terror groups. The South Korean leader said the terror attacks on Paris calls for the attention of not only the G20 leaders, but also the collective intelligence and courage of the world. On the final day of the summit, the leaders will adopt a joint statement reiterating their commitment to stay united in combating terrorism. This will be the first written statement issued by the G20 on any political issue. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News, Antalya.
Now, while the Paris attacks have turned the G20's focus towards defeating terrorism, conventional economic issues have not been put aside. During the meeting's first session, President Park revealed her plan for an annual joint Northeast Asia investment worth $63 billion with the international community. The amount is based on the annual demand for infrastructure in the region, including North Korea. However, the president's senior presidential secretary for economic affairs told reporters the plan could only go ahead if Pyongyang gives up its nuclear program. President Park also spoke about her plan to create a Northeast Asian Development Bank, a proposal she previously made to individual countries, but not at such a multi-member event. Now, UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon will reportedly visit Pyongyang this week. Citing a senior UN official in New York, Seoul-based Yonhap news agency reports that Ban will probably hold talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. With a slew of issues expected to be on the table, including human rights and the regime's nuclear ambitions, the source says the UN chief won't return empty-handed. The United Nations and the South Korean government have not confirmed the report. We must stress that. Ban planned to visit the North Korean border city of Kaesong in May, but Pyongyang cancelled the approval at the last minute without explanation. If Ban does make the trip, he will become just the third UN Secretary-General to visit North Korea. Now, China's yuan has moved closer to joining other top global currencies in the International Monetary Fund's benchmark foreign exchange basket after the United States expressed its support for the move. U.S. Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew reaffirmed to China's Vice Premier and Finance Minister that Washington supports adding the yuan currency to the IMF's currency basket as long as it meets all of the criteria. The statement comes 2 days after IMF chief Christine Lagarde recommended the Chinese currency be added to its $280 billion basket of currency reserves known officially as Special Drawing Rights, or SDR. Lagarde will chair a meeting of the IMF's executive board on November 30th to consider the yuan's inclusion in that basket. Now, LG Electronics OLED TV, or OLED TV, has received top marks from US consumer review magazine Consumer Reports. In the recent review, the 55-inch LG OLED TV earned the top grade among rival models in the 55 to 59-inch group with a total score of 80. The model was especially praised for its resolution, viewing angles and lack of motion blur. Second place was also taken by LG's Ultra OLED TV, followed by Samsung Electronics' Ultra HD TV models in the third and fourth spots. Korean manufacturers took the top spots in all 6 segments categorized by the evaluator, including HD resolution, 3D performance and sound quality. Korea's largest chemicals company, LG Chem, has opened its first electric vehicle battery plant in China, becoming the first company to have such factories in China, South Korea and the United States. Now, LG Chem says the plant, located in the eastern city of Nanjing, will be able to produce over 50,000 battery units a year from next year. The combined annual production of all 3 plants will exceed 180,000 units for dedicated electric cars. LG Chem has signed deals to supply EV batteries to car makers, including China's biggest automaker, Chang'an Automobile. The company's goal is to achieve accumulated sales of over 10 trillion Korean won, that's roughly $8.5 billion by 2018. Now, Hyundai Motor has announced that global sales for its luxury Genesis series topped 400,000 in October. Korea's largest automaker said domestic sales made up 202,000 units. Hyundai projects international sales of the high-end sedans to exceed 200,000 by the end of November. Now, launched back in 2008, the Genesis BH model series sold over 260,000 units worldwide. The second generation DH model, released in 2013, has sold almost 140,000 units, with more units being sold overseas now than in Korea. Early this month, Hyundai announced plans to spin off its Genesis series as a separate luxury brand called Genesis Motors. The initiative is aimed at making further inroads into the global luxury car market. Now, classical music album sales have been shooting up in recent weeks following the success of a young Korean piano player at a highly prestigious competition in Europe. Our Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
Scores of people are lined up in the early hours of morning, waiting for a record store to open. Some have been waiting since the crack of dawn to get their hands on Cho Sung-jin's latest album. Cho is a 21-year-old Korean pianist who won the prestigious international Frédéric Chopin piano competition in Poland last month.
I came here early to make sure I could buy the album first. I hope my purchase helps the pianist.
Cho's album was released worldwide by prestigious classical music label Doichi Gramophone and Universal Music on November 6. It's made up of 30 tracks, with some coming from Cho's winning live performance.
Within a week of its release, all 50,000 albums have been sold in Korea. The second batch of 20,000 flew off shelves in just 4 days. It's especially spectacular when you consider that most classic albums up until now have struggled to reach sales of 10,000 albums. And to hit the 50,000 mark in a space of a week is unprecedented.
The album's distributor says it has ordered 50,000 more copies, which are also expected to be gone by the end of the year.
I've seen people wait in line for K-pop albums, but in 10 years I have never seen nor imagined seeing people line up for a classical music album.
And it seems the popularity of classical music as a whole is growing because of Cho. Auction, one of country's biggest online shopping malls, says during the week of the album's release, sales of classical music albums soared more than 400% compared to the same period last year. That's not to mention the young Koreans who want to be the next Cho Sung-jin.
I've watched Cho play and he inspires me a lot. I hope I'll be able to play the piano like him someday.
Cho is scheduled to perform alongside Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra music director Maestro Jung Myung-hoon in July 2016. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Thank you as always for watching, and we hope your week is off to a great start. We'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Goodbye.